Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. A big thanks goes out to Arctic today because they provided this cooler for us to test out today. This is the Freezer 34 eSports Duo, so there are two fans included in it to be used in a push-pull configuration, or if you don't like the push-pull configuration, you can always do something else with that second fan. There's no reason it needs to be tied to the cooler. You can actually just use it as a case fan if you would prefer. But let's go ahead and run some testing on this particular cooler and figure out just if we like it at the price of $40 right now on Amazon, and I'll leave a link to it in the description down below as well in case you want to check it out for yourself. But let's take a look at it, see if it's a good cooler, and see if it's worth your $40. To get started with a physical overview of the Freezer 34 eSports Duo, we have two 120mm static pressure optimized fans from Arctic here, and these are really solid fans. They're not the highest quality fans I've ever seen, obviously, but for getting two of them at a price of right now $40 on Amazon, this isn't a bad start to the cooler. As far as the cooler goes itself, this cooler stands at 157mm tall, so you're going to want to check to make sure that your case can actually accommodate this cooler, as it's not the shortest one out on the market. Socket compatibility is very strong, with AM4 being supported on the AMD side of things, and then Intel's modern CPUs are also supported with LGA 2066, as well as any of the LGA 1150 series of sockets, whether it be 1150, 51, 55, 56, any of those will all be supported by this cooler. Now, this tower does feature 4 full contact copper heat pipes running clear through the tower, and this is one of the places where this cooler differs quite a bit from the original Freezer 33 coolers, in that these copper heat pipes are not clumped together on the edges of the heatsink itself. They're actually about equally spread out throughout the heatsink as they run through it, and I think the idea here is that provides a little bit more even heat dissipation throughout the entire heatsink, which I'm sure results in slightly better temperatures, or at least that seems to be the idea. RAM clearance shouldn't be an issue, as the front fan does not interfere with the DIMM slots on the front side of the motherboard. And finally, the last big difference between the Freezer 34 and the Freezer 33 series is actually the mounting solution. Whereas the Freezer 33 series relied on you to use longer sort of screws to drive into a backplate going through the mounting mechanism on the actual tower itself, the Freezer 34 series uses a standoff system where you screw the standoffs directly into whatever backplate you're working with. In the AMD cases, you're going to be using the stock backplate. In Intel's cases, they provide a backplate for you, but then you just simply set the cooler on top of those post standoffs and put nuts on top of the post then to secure the cooler down, which is by far the better solution. It's something that Scythe is currently sort of doing with their systems. Noctua has done a similar system for years with their coolers, and I'm really happy to see Arctic adopt this system because frankly, it's just a lot easier for the end user. And now for the actual temperature testing, I didn't really have other coolers laying around the office to actually test against the Freezer 34, but I will tell you that the Freezer 34 performed quite well. And what's interesting here is there doesn't really seem to be much of an advantage in an open test bench like I was using for having two fans versus one fan. The thing here is, though, the Duo is only about $2 more on the MSRP side than the single fan variant. So even if we're not seeing much of a temperature performance gain here, it looks like if you have any use whatsoever for an additional fan, you should actually go ahead and pick up the Freezer 34 Duo, because that gives you that extra 120mm fan, which is a solid fan that you can mount somewhere else in your case where it may be more beneficial than just on the tower itself. But I did not test this cooler in a closed off computer system, so it's hard to tell, at least from my standpoint, exactly how that second fan is going to affect temperatures in a closed off system. If you have an exhaust fan out the back of your system, I suspect that it won't make much of a difference, but if you have no exhaust fan whatsoever in your system out the back, then it may be worth keeping that push-pull configuration on this tower anyways. And finally, let's go ahead and take a sound test just to see how this thing sounds when it's at idle versus when it's at full load. So I suppose it is conclusion time, and I know that with testing with the i7 4770K D-Lid, 1.35 volts, 4.5 gigahertz, that's not a great benchmark for modern CPUs, but I understand that the 4770K was never a cool chip to begin with. Even with the D-Lid and liquid metal, it's still not the coolest chip out there, and this particular cooler kept it nice and chilly at 75 degrees under completely full load, giving me even a little bit more headroom to keep pushing this CPU possibly a little bit further. And this cooler is going to be great for pretty much any modern CPUs, except when you're talking about the highest end Intel chips, talking about the 8700K, the 9700K, and the 9900K. For those CPUs, if you're really wanting to push them with an overclock. Now, to be clear, with stock clocks, this thing would probably be just fine. But with those CPUs, you're probably going to be wanting to look at a CPU cooler that's more than $40. You're probably going to be looking at 240 millimeter AIO coolers, or even on up to custom water loops for things like the 9900K. So with all that being said, the Arctic Freezer 34 eSports Duo gets a big thumbs up from me. It, in its price range, is a really solid value, especially because it does come with that second fan, which you can use on the cooler itself, or if you don't see much benefit there, you can move the fan around and experiment to see where that second fan is best justified in your system. But if you like this video, give it a like, share, subscribe, comment. Again, I'll leave a link down below to the Arctic 34 eSports Duo, the Freezer 34 eSports Duo, that is. It comes in several different colors in case you're trying to match up a system build with a color combination, so that is available to you. And of course, I'll let YouTube queue up a couple more videos around me from my channel for you to watch. I'm Shane with Hoosier Hardware, and I'll see you guys in the next video.